Sanitation Authority, now known as Alex Renew. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as it appears? And it has been changed, right? There's closed session at the end. Motion to approve. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Before we start, let's do some introductions. Steve is here from Fairfax.
Yes.
Glad you're here. Thank you. Aaron, good to see you. Justin, you want to make
The only
introductions?
face that you might not be familiar with is Justin. Can you stand up and introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, my name is Jessen. I go by Jess. I'm an executive assistant here at Alex Renew. I work under Caitlin, and I have a part to play in just ordering food and setting up a couple of things, and including your furniture that should be coming in hopefully sometime in the very near future. Pleasure to meet you all.
I think you've met the rest.
Not the rest. Yeah, let's, Madam Secretary, any members of the public?
No members.
Members of the public. Move right to the consent agenda, minutes from our meeting on the 18th of February. Take a moment, but I will consider a motion to approve when ready.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Administrative items, Finance and Audit Committee. I understand we had a meeting recently.
We've had actually two meetings. More of a work session. We started on the budget and then we had a meeting and got the preliminary draft budget. We discussed it between the first and the second meeting. There were some back and forth and discussions and some slight alterations. And we now have to kind of enter the board sphere for decision making on this and our rates for the coming year. So we'll get a presentation tonight. In addition, we have also have the the financial policy related to cash also in front of us. We discussed that, and the committee recommends that the full board approve it. That's it. That's all we have to report.
Yes. I'd like to thank the board members all board members for attending the committee meetings. It makes presentation at the board meeting very easy, right? Everybody's seen it before. Good. We don't need to vote on this today.
I think two items under 5A. Just to recommend the Finance and Art Committee would recommend the board.
Yep.
We move from preliminary draft to draft, and then we would take action on the financial policy as a board. So the action tonight was the financial policy. We have that as an action under 5A, just the financial policy piece.
So we'll approve it tonight.
Financial policy.
Policy.
Policy, this is good. Committee would recommend the board, this be brought forward as far as the budget for the board to consider it.
Yep.
Have not gone through line item by line item and the details yet. So that's to come.
Do that next month. But the policy we'll move on tonight. So
Do we want to walk through the policy again, or
Depends on how the rest of the board feels. No, no, I think we're all set.
we spent a lot of time in committee going over it.
Yep.
It was committee of the whole.
Incorporated our edits.
Mr. Jenks, do you want to make a motion to approve the financial policy?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Move on to 5B. Update from the governance committee, Mr. Beal.
We have, our next formal meeting is April 7th, 2025. We're having a pre-meeting we for them all on March 26th. That's at 3:30, correct? The full agenda for that.
So that's coming up. At tab 3, you'll see the calendar of events for the board for the next year. Carl, is there anything you want to bring to our attention?
Yeah, just one thing that's not on the board calendar, but we discussed maybe the board attending this in the future is the Alex Chambers General Assembly breakfast is on Thursday, March 20th. Staff will be attending, representing the organization and supporting the city and our delegation, our Alexandria delegation for the General Assembly. March 31st, it's now on your board calendar. We're going to have a 5th floor ribbon cutting, celebrating the completion of the 5th floor and the city moving in. The city's we have occupancy. The city can move in on the 24th of March. And hopefully by the 31st, everything's cleaned up. We can have a ribbon cutting that's been coordinated with city council. And it is on their calendar. So it's up to the board if you all want to attend. It's from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock PM on the 5th floor. We're just going to have a short little ceremony and a tour of the newly completed 5th floor. And March 31st from 5 to 6.
I will be out of town. Any board members want to be here?
No.
This is I think, a big milestone. It's a good event.
It is. Exciting. The April 27th, just a reminder, Dr. Juan is the Delray Garden Fest. You'll have remarks for the Ellen Pickering Award that we'll coordinate with you through the communications team, through Matt and Bethany to coordinate remarks at the Delray Garden Fest on April 27th. That's the Ellen Pickering Award.
Okay.
And then just a reminder, June 7th is our Big Hoofs Run dedication day for completion of Run. So hopefully we get some leaves out and things start to look like plants and not sticks sticking out of the ground. But that day we'll also be doing Wayne County signage that we've been coordinating with OHA, Mr. Myers. So it's a big event for unveiling of African American Heritage Park and the completed Post Run Interceptor, which is now accepting flood. And we sent the board to save the date. City of Fairfax will also be getting save the dates if they haven't done that yet. Should have received save the dates for that June 7th date. And that's been coordinated with the city through the council calendar as well.
A lot of things to look forward to. Moving right on to new business. Presentation on the 4 MGD expansion.
Going back to item 5A,
Mhm.
just from a high level budget standpoint. So I know that Fairfax and the city were not our finance and audit meetings. I'd like Ms. Fian and Ms. Johnson to go through the main budget overview, the highlights.
Okay.
Just so
I'm sorry for rushing that. I'm sorry.
Okay. Just so Fairfax and the city can see where we're going with it. So maybe get some budget highlight and.
So this is a slide that just runs through the 3 main parts of our budget for fiscal year 26. So most of operating expenses, debt service expenses, and capital. And then for each of these, what are the highlights for expenses and revenues? On the operating expenses side, we have some additional additional staff to help us with our asset management system, training our staff with a technical trainer. And then we are in the process of, we are anticipating a series of retirements from our staff over the next several years. And so in anticipation of those retirements, we are bringing in 5 maintenance apprentices to run through an apprentice program to start bringing in new people as those other anticipated retirees exit our staff. And so we have institutional knowledge maintained through the organization. And then on the salary side, we anticipate a merit increase as well as performance-based awards of 5%. For debt service, we have an anticipated about 20 million in total debt service payments for capital loans, which is a slight decrease from last year due to retirement or decrease of principal and interest payments for bonds that were procured back in 2004 and 2006. And for capital, we're continuing to invest significantly in River Renew with its commissioning this year. So as we pushed out the project to account for the delays that we've seen, there's a higher anticipated capital, and that's really because the project itself is delayed. So we're in the 5th year of construction, and about 100 million in capital is anticipated for this upcoming fiscal year. We're going to see our phase 4 projects with our biosolids diversification, headworks renewal, and nutrient reduction projects really start to pick up in capital investment. So we're anticipating about $50 million in capital for the next year. On revenues, we are making a rate recommendation to the board this year for 5% to increase the rates to support River Renew and the ongoing capital investments for River Renew. We're anticipating about 500,000 in projected interest income for our debt service. And then on capital, as we start to make greater investments in the plant and spend more focus on the plant infrastructure, there's an anticipated 60 million in Fairfax capital contributions and about 1 million in projected interest income.
Three and four.
This is we have just an infographic of all of these costs spread out across. So across our plant or our infrastructure, the total budget is 258.3 million. We are working on doing some updates to this infographic to better convey which of these costs are operating, which of these costs are capital, and then this is the debt service down here. Largely, this is the operating budget of 39 million. A little bit of operating is included in this total 7.2 million for Arlington. And then the rest of this is capital upgrades, either improvement, renewal, and replacement program projects or phase forward and River Renew. And this slide just summarizes expenses and revenues from a high level. So again, 258.3 million total budget. That's composed of 197.2 million in capital, 20.2 million in debt service, and then operating expenses of 40.9 million. This includes a transfer of 2.5 million to reserves to account for unforeseen events that come up throughout the year. And on the revenue side, we have 120.8 million in general capital proceeds, the 60 million from Fairfax capital contributions, and 78.1 million in operating revenues.
I think one of the key takeaways for Fairfax is the increase is about a 45% increase year over year, because our large investment over the last 7 years has been on River Renew, which did not have the typical 60-40 split. We're coming back to the plant to take on some work that has been delayed as a result of River Renew, and we're starting on work that is 60-40. So you're seeing a little uptick this year in Fairfax capital contributions. That explains the increase from last year, about 40 million to about 60 million this year. Looking at the rates, and then slide 8.
The rate recommendation for this year is a 2-year rate recommendation. For 2026, it's a 5% increase, and for 2027, it's a 5.7% increase over the previous years.
And the percentage of that associated with River Renew?
About 63 to 64% of these 2 rate recommendations are associated with the increase needed for River Renew.
16, 17, and then schedule.
This just hits on the major capital, our budget for major capital projects for the upcoming year. So spaceport projects are these three projects, as well as the process optimization projects. So for biosolids diversification, we'll be anticipating to spend about 25 million, really focused on finishing design and starting construction, and then continuing on short-term upgrades, and then continuing design on medium-term upgrades to the drying facility. For the Headworks Renewal Project, we're anticipating about 20 million or 21 million. Really, the focus of that project is, again, finishing design and starting construction on the primary rear observation house, primary cellular tanks, and sludge pumps. The nutrient reduction project's a little bit behind these two projects, and so this year we anticipate about 2.5 million, and largely is going to be spent on procuring a design builder and executing a contract with that design builder. For River Renew, we anticipate spending about 96 million, focused on completing pump stations and starting commissioning around that project. And then our IR&R program, our improvement, renewal, and replacement program, is about 13 million, and that's really focused on improvements around the plant and other infrastructure. And this just takes our budget and puts it in a different format that really shows from operating debt and capital standpoint how the flow of funds works from our master indenture, and really how each of these components is being funded. First, starting with customer rates and contributions from Fairfax County associated with our operating expenses, and how that revenue flows into our debt service and capital. One thing to point out on here is just the transfer to reserves happens up here in the operating expenses, and the additional Fairfax capital contributions is down here shown in capital. So this is, we've moved on from presenting to the Finance and Audit Committee. Tonight, Finance and Audit Committee is presenting the preliminary draft budget and rate recommendation for consideration. That earlier, the next step is to adopt the draft budget and rate recommendation for public hearing, which will hold on May 17th. And then as the next step from there is to approve the budget and rate recommendation at the June 4th meeting.
Any questions? Ms. Fee, and I apologize for making you rush through. That was totally my mistake.
You were excited to go.
That's not excited.
No, not excited.
Steve, Aaron, any you're good? Good. Okay. Moving on to new business. Presentation on the recovery facility for MGD expansion. Mr. Carl, I promise I will not rush this one. This is new.
So I want to thank Fairfax and the city for working with us over the last several months. We've been working on this since last spring, and at least wanted to bring it to the board to give an update of where we stand with respect to the 4 million gallon per day expansion project. I'll get into the details as we work through the deck. Just want to step back and just a little education for everybody in the room. This all starts with the total maximum daily load. In our form, it's a Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily load, or TMDL. We just like to refer to it as a pollution diet. So back in the early 80s, the Bay program got its legs. At that time, our pollutant load to the Bay was much higher and out of balance with water quality in the Bay. And what we've done since 1983, 1987 with embayment standards, and eventually with the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, we've worked as wastewater entities to bring those loads into balance. So we have a total maximum daily load that we're subject to meeting here at Alex Renew as part of our daily outfall permit through outfall 1, as well as through 3 of the outfalls in River Renew. So when we look at what with Bay TMDL allocated waste loads, and those waste loads were for things like total suspended solids, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And when you go back through and look at the watershed improvement program through the Bay TMDL, there's both point and non-point sources. So non-point sources have been much more difficult to control. That's your agricultural runoff, stormwater runoff that doesn't get discharged via pipe, air deposition, runoff from forests, all have a load associated with them in the Bay TMDL. When you go over to point sources, they're a bit easier to regulate because they're end of pipe points. Alex Renew has both CSOs and a wastewater outfall, 2 wastewater outfalls, one's an emergency. So we're permitted through a point source, and we were assigned waste load allocations by the the Chesapeake Bay TMDL. There's also the MS4 stormwater system, which is owned and operated by the city. And then there's industrial discharge permits, BPDS permits for industry with waste loads. So when we take a step back and look at the load allocations for Alexandria that came out of the WIP, Watershed Improvement Plan, and 3 of them so far as a result of the Bay TMDL, they allocated waste loads for stormwater, nitrogen, phosphorus, and suspended solids are what we're going to primarily talk about tonight. So stormwater has a load. Alex Renew, our wastewater plant, has a load, and they're outlined here, about 500,000 for total nitrogen, 30,000 for phosphorus, and about 5 million for suspended solids. And then also with the transfer of the outfalls back in 2018 from the city to Alex Renew, we also accepted waste load transfer from the combined sewer outfalls to our facility to be able to meet the waste load allocations with respect to the 4 combined sewer overflows. These are unmitigated. You might be used to seeing waste load allocation with your combined sewer outfalls being mitigated by a long-term control plan. The previous WIP did not consider we had any control of those outfalls, and the small amount of waste load allocation is still in the Bay TMDL. That has not been updated.
Largely impact your payment.
If the WIP would get updated, it would match whatever our control criteria is per long-term control plan. This is uncontrolled. Has not been updated. So when these waste load allocations for CSO were set, some utilities had advanced their long-term control plans. Alexandria had not. So we've got the full waste load allocation for the small portion of our CSO system. DC Water, other municipalities may not have that.
How is compliance measured for the CSO WLA?
How will it be measured?
How will it be measured?
We will have outfall monitoring.
Okay.
Activations, and we know the concentration, rough numbers, treated through the plant for TN, 3 milligrams per liter. Coming into the plant or CSO would be about 6 milligrams per liter.
Okay.
So what happens is that load gets transferred to the plant. We treat it, and we end up creating a credit here in Alexandria, and we're going to trade that back to the city for their MS4 program for the CSOs.
Thank you.
As long as these numbers don't get reduced. If they get reduced, it would meet whatever we had in the long-term control plan. Then there's no more credit for the city's MS4.
Another round of planning coming up where they might update the numbers?
Yes, myself and Jamie Mitchell from HRSD are chair of the committee for the new modeling for the WIP. Dr. Wan's also on the committee. Not as important. So we're really focused today though in the middle.
Those two.
So our waste load allocation is set at a flow rate as well. Dry weather flow rate of 54 million gallons per day. We are a wet weather facility, but that does not come into play with our waste load allocation shown here. It's assuming 54 MGD. So when we take those waste load allocations at 54 MGD and break them down into concentration, that sets our permit limits. So we can look at it two ways. One is a load limit. So we have load limits on biochemical oxygen demand, total suspended solids, ammonia, and phosphorus that are monthly averages. And that's about 1,000 kilograms per day. BOD, 1,200 for solids, 200 for ammonia, 81 for phosphorus. When you break that down into concentration based on our flow rate, you see what you see in the board report every month, 5 milligrams per liter for BOD, 6 milligrams per liter for TSS, 1 milligram per liter for ammonia coming up in April, and then 0.18 for phosphorus. So those are our monthly limits in our permit. And that's all breaks down from our waste load allocation. We also have yearly permit limits for both TP, phosphorus, and TN, total nitrogen, of 0.18 and 3. So we have to meet it on the monthly as well as on the yearly average. In addition to those aren't our only permit requirements. We also have other concentration limits for water quality in the form of pH, dissolved oxygen, E. coli, pH and DO, dissolved oxygen are daily. You'll see those sometimes reported out in the board report as well. And then E. coli is a 30-day geomean or monthly geometric mean. And that's 126. I forget what the N is, Allison. Thanks. Per milliliter. And we're usually well below that. We're down around 1 to 2 or 0. We also have narrative-based criteria in our permit. When you read through our DPDS permit, 2 of those criteria are no floating solids, foam, and then also no nuisance conditions, ponding, odors, et cetera, for our reclaimed water system that we would recycle back into this building or eventually use and distribute to the community. So our reclaimed water system is folded into our overall 50s permit. And then every 5 years on the right, there's a table. There's probably 120 plus parameters in our permit that get tested for every time we re-up our permit. We just wanted to highlight that as well. Those are your metals and volatile organic compounds. Some of these we've highlighted because we do have the ones with an asterisk are where we've had, when we've scanned at our permit renewal, we've seen those, DEQ has actually run those through their water quality model to see if there should be effluent limits placed on Alex Renew as a result of the water quality modeling. So for us, we have yet to get water quality limits on any of these additional parameters, but this is where you'd see something like PFAS or PCBs come up as we do permit renewal and as regulations change. But right now, the 4 heavy metals that we're looking at were cadmium, copper, nickel, and zinc. And for those of you who work in the industry, that's the reasonable potential analysis that you would do to get that limit then placed into your permit. We did not hit the threshold based on the modeling or the waste load allocation for those metals. But those are 4 areas that we did have a hit on. You can see we're well below the water quality standard with those numbers. So a little background on the permit because it helps set us up for a discussion about the future. One other thing to understand is that at the plant, we always talk about 60-40. There is a service agreement with the state of Alexandria that sets a limit, an annual limit for inflows into the plant to be an average of 21.6 MGD. That's 40% of our 54 MGD. And on the same side, we have a service agreement with Fairfax, which dates to 1998, where they have a 60% share in the wastewater facility and in the plant. That's why you see their capital contributions at 60% and in their IR&R at 60% of the 0.7% of our capital investments. So that breaks down to a flow rate of 32.4 for Fairfax, 21.6 for the city. city's agreement was most recently updated in 2018, part of the outfall transfer. Oh, this one. So going back in time, going back to 2011, the city, Fairfax, and Alex Renew started working together on a series of task orders. And it started with task order 11 to go with 2011. And that task order, one of the outcomes of that task order, identified some additional capacity needs for the city for growth between 2011 and 2040. And it identified sometime around 2040, the city would need about 4 MGD to accommodate for growth in the city. That's 4 MGD on top of the 54 MGD of our plan. In November 2012, the city updated the sanitary sewer master plan, and you'll see that same language in the sanitary sewer master plan from 2012. It identifies a very specific number, 4.2. Task order 14, not sure why it's 14, but it came out in April 2013. Task order 14 identified an option for the city to purchase capacity rights from Fairfax. So said otherwise, hey, Fairfax, can we purchase some of your 32.4 MGD to make up make ourselves whole for our future growth because the plant has capacity, right? We're at 38 MGD today. So the plant has capacity. Can we buy some shares? So it outlined an option in TO 14 for that. Task order 16, it looked at some capacity improvements, but you can actually follow it. It's kind of neat to follow task order by task order. The discussion was largely focused on wet weather and the West Side wet weather program and the city's long-term control plan at the time. That was July 2015. Fast forward 2 years later, we got the CSO law from the General Assembly. As a result of that, we changed gears as the city, Alex Renew, and Fairfax, and we focused on how to get River Renew done by July 1st, 2025. So one of the first things that came out of that was the updated service agreement with the city. It didn't change anything other than from a capacity share standpoint, other than ownership of the outfall. We then executed a cost share outside of our agreement with Fairfax. It's an MOU to solely deal with the wet weather flows associated with River Renew. That is outside the 60/40. It's based on peak flows of the plant during wet weather. It's not something we'll talk about today as a result of the dry weather flows. So it's important to note that the cost share MOU lives outside of the service agreement, and it deals specifically with River Renew wet weather flows. And there's 5 different cost splits in that cost share. In August 2021, the city updated their sanitary master plan, identifying that 2040 target for additional 4 MGD. And then in spring 2024, we started to refocus. Now that River Renew is getting closer to substantial completion, we went back to where we were in 2010 timeframe to start talking about this again. Okay. So we monitor city's flow trends and city and Fairfax's flow trends on a monthly and quarterly basis. We do a true up every quarter with both parties based on actual data coming into the plant and based on water meter reads where we cannot have sewer meters measuring flow into the plant. We use water record data. So what we've noticed is over the past, I'd say 5 years, we've seen the city's flows trending upward and upward and upward, close to that 21.6 MGD. You can see 2021, 21.2. Last year was about 21.4. So we're getting closer to that trend a little earlier than the city had projected in their sanitary sewer master plan. But our team and Aaron's team are working diligently to see if there's some sort of connection or wet weather flows getting into the system that might be driving these numbers up. So there's a need for the system expansion so we can keep Fairfax whole at 32.4. The city would have to increase their capacity up to 25.6 by that 4 additional MGD. So the 2018 service agreement between the city and Alex Renew considered that. And it asks for a good faith approach by the parties to sit down, which we've been doing since last August. And it has remedies for exceedances. The city could buy flows shares from Fairfax. That's one option, and reallocate capacity and keep the plant at 54 MGD with our current waste load allocation. Or it could look at a funding agreement between Alex Renew and the city for the city to then have growth pay for growth is a better way to say what's written on this slide. And that would be paying for additional expansion of the plant through connection fees and other funding mechanisms by the city. And that would have to be you can let Aaron discuss this, but if there's questions about funding, my understanding is it could be a mix of debt or cash that the city might have from some of these fees. But it'll take time for them to pay back these investments, just like it would for any project that we would undertake.
Is Fairfax open to the reallocation?
Well, so yes, we've discussed this with both parties so far. Yeah. Our understanding, and Steve, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Fairfax, based on their projections, they need their 32.4. So we're looking at the option of expanding the plant by 4 MGD to accommodate city flows. So we're not exploring the idea right now of a purchase of city purchasing Fairfax shares. It's all tonight's focused on is how do we upgrade our facility to get additional 4 MGD and still meet that same waste load allocation that I showed on 4 slides ago. So if we expand the plant by 4 MGD, what doesn't change? Our load allocations. So we cannot get additional load allocations because we get more flow. So what do we have to do? We have to drive our numbers down by expanding the plant in a capacity to deal with the additional loading that we're receiving from the city's additional 4 MGD. So that means lower nitrogen numbers, lower phosphorus numbers, and lower total suspended solids numbers. And you can see those numbers here in comparison to where we're at today. So 54 MGD is the number you see in the board report. Mr. Beals. 54 MGD. It is a dry presentation. 54 MGD today, that's the board report. To be able to get down and meet our same waste load allocation with the plant being re-rated for 58 MGD, these are the new numbers. 4.6 for TSS. I'm sorry, 4.6 for BOD, 5.5 for TSS, 0.9 for ammonia. We're going to get that anyway with our permit update. 0.17 for total phosphorus and 2.79 for total nitrogen. And if you look at the board report today, we hover around. This is the issue. TN, we hover around this now. So we're really being driven by the load allocation around nitrogen and the loadings around nitrogen. So how do we expand the plant to drive nitrogen numbers even lower than 2.79?
Just a background question here. Obviously, the increased flow is due to increased development and population in Alexandria. But our load does not change. Okay. What does the city do if it is experiencing a huge growth of population? For example, a southern city. Are they still limited by their old WLA?
I don't, outside of a TMDL, I'm lost. I'm sorry, Mr. Hill. I'm not sure what would happen outside of a city outside of this area would have to get more stringent controls, but I'm not sure what you would
We
do.
can ask the permitting authority to revise the TMDL.
Good. Not that we do that here. I'm just
Right.
thinking of a city that's going through explosive growth. How do they handle this?
Most cities don't have a 3 milligram per liter of TN. People are like at 10 or 20.
For special.
Elsewhere in the United States.
For the
This is the
Bay.
Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we're already very low on limits. So
Yeah.
Fairfax County, with Noman Coal, UOSA, the wastewater authorities in the Bay have ratcheted down to almost a limited technology on TN control. New York State's at 15. So, I mean, you can maybe accommodate that in growth. It depends on what you've got for a permit limit. So we're going to talk about tonight, we're fine on the rest of these numbers. We're really going to be focused on nitrogen. How can we expand the plant and keep it and drive that nitrogen number down? Amanda, anything? So to talk about the process, just a reminder of how we process wastewater at the plant. We come through the headworks of the plant, settle out solids. We go through biological nutrient removal, was built out in 2004. We kick it over then to a tertiary process for phosphorus removal. Go to UV, go out the outfall. Right now, today, all of our nitrogen control is in the biological nutrient removal process. And we hear our staff talk about it. They call it the biological reactor basins or BRBs. So you might hear me say that throughout tonight's presentation, but I'll try not to. So right now, all of our nitrification that is going from ammonia to nitrite, and denitrification, which is nitrate to nitrogen gas, getting the nitrogen out of the system, happens right there. All this does today is remove phosphorus through filtration and settle it. And some solids, helped out solids. Okay. So how can we efficiently and effectively, given our plant footprint, address the needs and support the city's growth? So we're going to zoom in. We've talked a lot to the board about the tertiary upgrades project over the last several months. And our tertiary filters needed upgrading back in 2018. They were put on hold to accommodate River Renew. So our tertiary filters, there's 22 filters. They are mixed media filters. It's like a sand in them, where the water simply just flows through, filters out phosphorus, solids, and then they're backwashed on a regular basis to clean them. So what's needed? These filters date to the 1970s. They need structural repairs to little troughs where the water comes in and into the filters. The underdrain system needs to be rehabilitated. The media needed to be replaced in 2018. And all the pumps and the air systems and all the ancillary equipment that goes along with the filter and a backwash system also needs replaced. So this has been planned since 2018. In addition to that, behind the filters, we have our tertiary settling tanks, and they're a series of plate settlers that are common to a water facility. They fit in the footprint, they work well for us. So they're going to get replaced, top plates, some of the baffles will be replaced. And we'll also rehabilitate some of the valving and other work associated with them. This whole system dates between the 70s, 80s. When was the last upgrade, Kevin? 2004. So some of the equipment's as new as 2004, but some of the equipment's also as old as the 70s. So one of the things, we looked at a bunch of different ideas. We went back to TO11 to see how we could address the 4MGD expansion and shoehorn it into our existing facilities and existing plan. And one of the ways to do this is through denitrification filters. So the idea or the scheme behind this whole thing is to convert our biological nutrient removal facility to nitrification only. That's going from ammonia to nitrate. So just do ammonia to nitrate through the BNR process. And to do that, so there's a series of anoxic and anaerobic zones. We have to take BRB6 from anoxic, no oxygen, and put some oxygen in there so the bugs can breathe and make that anaerobic zone. So we're converting that from night to denitrification only by adding air. Remember the process air compressor upgrade project? Where we put a new facility here and put a bunch of new diffusers in. It's the same thing just for that tank. That now our BRBs are just doing nitrification only. Where we then are proposing to move denitrification to the tertiary upgrades project and use the existing filters as denitrification filters by adding different media where you have microbial growth and you convert that nitrate to nitrogen gas. Problem is we don't have enough capacity at the moment to do it in the existing filters, and we have to add 6 additional filters onto the front of them. So we take the filters from 22 to 28. And with that, we're reliably getting around 2.3 to 2.5 TN through the model, through our Sumo model runs. We're using Sumo? That's the 4MGD expansion project. It's very straightforward. It's very easy to operate, and it's no different than what we do today, with the exception of some additional aeration zones, some more filters to maintain. It fits into our system nicely. We have the footprint for it. And there's synergies that we have by performing the work in conjunction with the tertiary upgrade project, and then packaging that into what we're calling the nutrient reduction project, the 2 projects together. Any questions?
We're expanding the plant, but we're not physically expanding the plant. We're just changing the process.
Yeah, it's funny.
But how do we
Flow doesn't change.
know this will work once it's done?
We have extensive modeling and testing. There are other facilities too. Richmond put in denitrification filters. It's a proven technology. But it's interesting. We're expanding the plant, but we can take 116 through the headworks, right? There's bottlenecks throughout the plant. The bottleneck for us right now is our nitrogen removal process. It's not a flow issue, it's a loading issue. We could write agreements over again and be based on loading these days. Not a flow issue.
In a normal situation, anybody who do the workflows on the loaders.
Later on in the meeting tonight, we're going to talk about some changes to the Animox process. Where is that performed? In the purple block there?
It's off. So the way we look at Animox is just think it's it's a facility that sits over here and just deals with a load of ammonia. So Animox is right there, but it's not part of the mainstream treatment system.
Currently.
Never is.
Okay.
So it's always we call it a side stream process. The memo's written that way. So it sits over there on its own. And what it does is right now, today, Animox isn't running. CPT is not running.
Right.
So the dewatering centrate comes off the solid system. It gets routed back to the BRBs.
Goes back to the purple.
And that's 30% of our ammonia load.
Right.
30% of our ammonia load comes directly from our
Centrate.
own solids.
Yeah.
Because of our digestion process. What all Animox does is we take that dewatering centrate from here, run it through there, and then send it back to here to take the load off the biological nutrient removal process. And that reduces the ammonia load and gives us more reliability, less chemical, and less energy for aeration. Right now, we run between 4 and 6 blowers to meet our TN. Allison's dumping a ton of methanol in there too. We keep going over budget on methanol. Kidding, but yeah. So I mean, getting TN to 3 right now without centrate pretreatment is challenging because we're returning that ammonia to here. CPT will help reduce that load and give us more stability and reliability.
Yeah, you know what's so powerful about your presentation here is you realize how we're moving 50+ million gallons a day of liquid all over the plant. It's hopscotching all over the plant. It's not a linear left to right kind of process.
It moves around and gets pumped 3 times, so 4 times we're over now.
Because it's been
If
expanded
we were starting from scratch,
for years.
it would be much simpler. So.
Yeah.
So, because this was, where did we have room? Okay, we can do this up here and we'll move up water up here and then bring it back down.
Right.
It's remarkable.
So one of the synergies I mentioned of performing for engineering work with tertiary is we see a significant cost savings when they're done together. And that's in the form of, we're doing it now, it's ahead of time, so time value of money. There's savings by doing it today. There's synergies with having one resident engineer team, inspection team, one owner's advisor. For doing the work, there's only one mobilization, demobilization. That all saves money. In addition to that, when we're dealing with a plant, when we're dealing with an active plant, building a facility like this, those 6 additional filters can help us for maintenance of plant operations. And we're only dealing with maintenance of plant operations one time through one project and not delaying it by another 5 years and having to come back and do it again. So that reduces our risk of permit noncompliance, and it also reduces the burden on our staff. And also Mr. Carberry, who runs around the plant on a daily basis, coordinating all of this work on our behalf. And then there's a slight benefit too, less procurement burden. We can package all this up into one progressive design build job, get the design done, and have everything finished by, 2033. So less administrivia on Ms. Fian and her department.
What order of magnitude would you put on the savings of us being able to do it earlier?
So just by doing the project earlier, there's a $10 million savings because of escalation and inflation. Total costs about $25 million by doing it now as part of the tertiary job.
25 million savings.
Savings, correct.
This is a standalone project or?
So the 4MGD would get lumped into the tertiary upgrades project and it's all one then. It's all done as one, but tracked monetarily separately. So Fairfax is paying their fair share and not overpaying for the portion of the city only. So it'd be all one umbrella project. Because it's all, I guess, part of it is just replacing filter media, right? Do that once, put the right media in there and get denitrification out of it. So we have to replace the media anyway. There's an advantage in just doing the media once. And then building in the new filters. So after this project, the cost share between Alex Renew and the city will change. And the cost share between Alex Renew and Fairfax will change. So that cost split will go from 60-40 to 56-44. There's some decimals in there, but roughly number. Fairfax's will still have their 32.4 capacity share of the plant. The city will now have a 25.6 capacity share. Well,
I know that Fairfax is gonna, Trump, Decker's gonna want to talk to you some more.
Yep.
One of the biggest concerns, he may have already brought it up to you, is that we're paying for part of the expansion, but we really don't see any capacity increases for us
Yeah.
as well.
the investment that Shram's concerned, the investment that Fairfax has made, the city's going to be using some of that capacity for Fairfax's contributions to the plant already. I think one of the things that we found, Steve, is that the current agreement considers that. So we have a presentation ready to go for you and the city to go through and how to true up those numbers. So there is a process to go through. It's based on remaining debt capacity for those assets. And then there's a savings in the future for future expansion as well, or for future work. So in short, you would go through your debt capacity of what we've got left on debt and reallocate 5644. And that would be on an annual basis. And then moving forward, any project moving forward, our solids upgrade program, $300 million, there's a 5644 split for that. So there's savings on that as well.
How does this factor into our long-term rate modeling? We're not there yet.
No, we're there. I mean, it's a 14 cent per year impact on rates, or 0.25% per year impact on rates by changing the capacity share for Alex. It's de minimis,
It sounds like you've worked through it. Good.
but that's the number. Over 10 years, it's $1.38.
Does that assume then that the growth projections the city has turn out to be reasonably correct, and so therefore some of the added costs is gonna get paid for by Newborough.
So I think the added cost we're talking about, what we're asking the city to pay for is, while we're on this slide, because we're gonna go in the numbers, is the new filters, which are,
I should reframe my question. The operating cost is the shares change. The impact is that analysis of the impact of the rate then assume that we get new customer, that we
Right.
basically, we
Right.
get the new customers they're just starting to use up that 4 MGD. And so the cost is higher, but the incremental cost to the ratepayer is lower because we have a bigger customer pool to spread the operating costs over.
the number I gave you didn't assume we had a greater customer base. It was our same current.
So it's could even be less than
Correct.
than what you said.
That's the upper bound. Yep.
So, cost, Steve, did I answer your question?
Yes, sir, thank you.
So when we look at the project, so the 4 MGD expansion has two things associated with it, D-night filters and BRBs. What we're saying is, maybe I'll start over here. So project on the left, tertiary 4 MGD expansion, prescription of each, I already went through that. Then we have a cost share. So 4 MGD would be city only. I'm trying to use a different term here than Alex only, because that means it's financed by Alex Renew. So the city would figure a way out to fund that work. That's 59 and 10 million, so about $69 million based on what we just went through. Alex Renew would not fund that, where we wouldn't issue debt for it, and Fairfax would not issue any debt for that work. So that's a total cost of $69 million borne by the city. For the tertiary upgrades, that's a joint 60-40 split, or in the new scenario, 56-44. Fairfax will get some savings on this job. Right now, it's just shown as 60-40 in tonight's discussion. Fairfax's contribution would be 30.6, likely a little bit less based on 56-44. Alex Renew finances the rest at 20.4 million. And you can see the total across the bottom of about $120 million for the whole project. Funded, broken down by funding, 30 by Fairfax, 70 by the city, 20 by Alex Renew. Alex Renew's number will go up, Fairfax's will go down by 4%. And then scheduling of the 4 MGD expansion. We'd like to do the tertiary upgrade in conjunction with the denitrification filters under one progressive design build job. And then we're looking at the BRB upgrades. We're still getting our arms around that when we get that job done, but we have that starting at the back end of the 4 MGD expansion. There's no reason, we coordinate with the city about when that work would be timed to get done. But the driver right now is this.
Yep.
We want to pair these two up. So next steps, I would like to, it was probably this slide deck was done before we met with the city in Fairfax next week. We want to circle back up with the city in Fairfax and kind of walk through what the agreement says and how Fairfax is compensated for some of their previous investments in the plant and how their investments change in the future. And show Fairfax what those savings are to the county. And that's an annual savings that you'll see for lack of a better word, credit that would go back to Fairfax, or they wouldn't have to pay, and that we would then have to finance as Alex Renew. Once we get that settled, we'd like to continue to coordinate with the city and finalize funding agreement, and procurement on this job's already underway. We had an industry outreach session back in February. RFQ this is progressive design build. You all approved a resolution for it a few months back. Issue an RFQ in April, issue an RFP in July, and then hopefully by January next year, we are bringing this to the board for approval for moving the job forward.
Request for 2025.
Sorry?
said April 2025.
Yeah, that's a mistake.
Can you go back to
Correct,
that
April.
level 5? What you looking for on that level 5? Are you looking for an upset limit?
Where? Here?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just saying these numbers are based on a class 5. So
Yeah.
conceptual. We put like these have they could vary by up to 50% or down 30% is usually what we put in these numbers.
Okay, you're gonna refine your number.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We are looking at ways to also try and see if there's a way we get more capacity out of some filters. We're currently studying that with our owner's advisor and Brown and Coble, who did some of the modeling work and came up with this scheme for us. But we're going through that right now too, to see if we can drive this number down.
Okay.
But these are very preliminary numbers. Mr. Jinks asked the same question as you did. How much it would cost if we did it later. So thank you. Because we already had a response for him.
Well, it looks like there's a lot of coordination that you've already done and that continues, but excellent presentation. The walk through the plant operations was very clear. Thank you. Okay, moving right along. Regional biosolids feasibility study.
At the end of the year last year, we mentioned that we would be doing a regional biosolids feasibility study that was based on a memorandum of understanding that was signed in November between the 5 regional authorities, Northern Virginia regional authorities here. The genesis of this MOU was a meeting of the CEOs of these authorities, and during that meeting, they discussed this concern about the future feasibility of land application to biosolids, particularly in light of more stringent regulations around biosolids. I think PFAS is really one of the big drivers for this. So the agreement was between, the MOU is between Alex Renew, Fauquier County, Loudon Water, Prince William Water, and Upper Aqua Service Authority. It was focused on the authorities because of the relative ease of signing an agreement like this. However, from the beginning, Fairfax, Noman Coal was part of the partnership, as well as Arlington County. The MOU talked about doing a feasibility study that would look at future biosolids productions, and Alex Renew volunteered to be the lead for the procurement and the contracting. So to ease in contracting, having one entity instead of 5 contracts with 5 entities. Here's a diagram of the partnership. We have the MOU partners here and our collaborative partners, Arlington and Fairfax. We, as partners, have been meeting since November of 2024 to refine the MOU, to kind of use the MOU to refine an RFP and to issue a procurement for the first activity that was outlined, which was a feasibility. So the goals of that study were to jointly develop a scope for a feasibility study that would evaluate technology alternatives as well as governance alternatives for the regional management of biosolids, explore economies of scale from this approach, instead of everybody constructing additional biosolids treatment capacity, looking to see if there are opportunities to share that. Really delving into a governance framework that is meaningful and allowable under regulations in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Further developing that partnership. This was from the CEOs, but there's added benefit to all of us working together through partnership. as well as next steps. The MOU envisions that this feasibility study is only the first step in kind of moving this approach forward. Any questions here? So here are the partners and collaborators. You guys have seen this slide before. There are 7 of us located in the Northern Virginia region. Together, what's important about this slide is that individually, we have significantly different biosolids treatment processes that we're currently using. And together we generate about 200,000 wet tons of biosolids per year. This regional feasibility approach is really helpful and timely right now, because you can see when we look to the future, many of us are in the process of evaluating doing biosolids management plans to evaluate where we might invest to upgrade our. So about half of the partners are looking to invest and construct new biosolids technologies in the next 10 years.
Before we move off that slide, if I'm running a plant and I use an incineration approach, what happens to the incinerator ash? That's not land applied, is it? Or is it?
No, often that's landfilled.
Okay.
So it's mostly landfilled here in Virginia. But the incinerator is, for maintenance activities, is often offline for a certain period of time, so they will land apply during that time.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand, do
Yeah.
each of these jurisdictions have the same regulatory pressures that, for example, we're facing?
They would, Mr. Hill, because I think the research is uncertain right now about the fate of PFAS through incineration. You can see that, for example, Prince William Water, they are exploring what their future, even though they incinerate right now, they're really looking into whether they would continue to incinerate or they'd go to another technology.
Thank you. Thank you.
Part of the regional study, technologies we've identified 2 conventional technologies that will be evaluated under the study, as well as a number of emerging technologies. The 2 conventional technologies are thermal drying and incineration. Those are technologies that are widely accepted in the industry. They've been proven out. A number of the facilities in Northern Virginia currently use these technologies. And these emerging technologies are technologies that are still under development. They have not been proven at the scale that we might need for a regional facility. So part of the feasibility study would be evaluating what would it take to move technologies into that scale, and if any of them would be viable alternatives for a regional facility. The scope element of the study has 6 scope elements. The first is project management. When we've collaborated on projects like this in the past, this project management is really critical. Herding cats from 7 facilities requires a steady hand. So this was one of the things that we really focused on. Alternatives evaluation. So I talked about that, alternatives evaluation for technologies. But equally important is this for siting, potential siting of a regional facility. We will be looking at potential sites through this study. We'll be looking at other regional case studies. While this feasibility study is still on the cutting edge, there are others that have looked at this approach and are kind of further on. So we want to learn from them, from those lessons learned around the country. We'll be doing a business case evaluation, looking at capital costs, but also the life cycle cost of any alternatives, and incorporating market end use of any products. Depending on the technology you select, there'll be different biosolids products being developed that you might get at the back end. We'll be doing a thorough regulatory review, looking at all aspects of regulation, but also looking and analyzing the impact of future potential PFAS regulations. Commonwealth. And then last but not least, doing a thorough governance analysis. This will be looking at what our governance approaches for a regional authority, as well as conducting a risk analysis on some of those alternatives and obstacles to a joint venture like this. I think it's really important at this stage to understand what some of those risks might be, so in future stages. The procurement timeline. So we issued the RFP in January 7th of 2025. Proposals were due in late February. And last week, the representatives from the partners reviewed the proposals that were received and made a recommendation to move into negotiations with one highly qualified proposer. So because we identified a highly qualified proposer out of the respondents, we have skipped the stage of interviews with the shortlisted. So we're moving right into negotiations with the hope of getting you a contract for approval by May.
How many proposals you got?
We received 3 proposals that represented about 6 firms. So there was a lot of partnering on this effort.
All the partners were represented on the evaluation committee.
All of the partners were represented in the evaluation committee. The selection advisory committee, the voting members were the MOU partners, but Arlington and Fairfax provided a lot of technical assistance and advice during the selection process.
How that cost gonna be split?
It will be, so the contract is not to exceed $1 million. It's going to be split by the percentage of biosolids produced by each agency, each of the 5 MOU partners, with Alex Renew having the largest share because we are well, this is normalized to what WOSA and Prince William produce a much smaller amount per dry tons per year. So it'll be split proportionally by the amount of biosolids each agency produces.
Thank
Just a couple of questions. So the total is 200,000 wet tons a year. Now let's translate that into something I can understand. How many truckloads?
So we have on average like 2.5 trucks per day. So if you look, that would be 5 trucks per day.
It'd be 20, 25 trucks.
25 trucks per day. Yep.
That's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. I think one thing that will help in the future state is that many of us are going to drying Class A pellets. So that will reduce the volume of biosolids produced and number of trucks.
Steve and Aaron, any questions? Members of the board?
I look forward to bringing this to you all for discussion in May.
I must say, I really applaud Alex Renew's leadership here. I mean, this is thinking outside the walls of our community and seeing how we can work together. I think it's great.
We're hoping that this will be a model for others in the Commonwealth. I think that's the hope of the MOU partners. So it's really exciting to be at the forefront of this.
Excellent work. Thank you.
Moving right along to 2025 initiatives. This is left over from last month.
You know, Ms. Dynas is going to be part of a panel at this year's Virginia Water and Waste Virginia Water and Waste Authority Association annual meeting on A's and W's. But we are, for the second year in a row, collaborating on a panel to talk specifically about this initiative, with respect to our regional partnership, as well as how we're working statewide for PFAS guidance in the state of Virginia around PFAS and biocides. So it's something that's coming up on April 7th. We'll be down in Stanton, not Staunton, to present on this. And Ms. Dinas will be part of a panel along with UOSA, Loudon Water, Western Virginia Water, and the Virginia Biosolids Council. So we're having a larger discussion at the association level about and participating amongst several different associations on a monthly basis as well. So we didn't get to this last month. I'll be very brief because I know we do have closed sessions tonight. We still have a lot to get through. But we wanted to make sure the board understood how we were aligning our business case each year with the strategic goals established by the board of directors. This is, partially to get feedback to make sure we're in the right direction. Where there's any questions about our initiatives before we kick off the year. When we talk about this is calendar year focused, not fiscal year. So this is from January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2025. So when we talk about the operational excellence goal, really want to highlight a few items. Biggest initiative right now we have, our largest spending is River and New, $96 million next year. We're nearing the end of construction at the outfall sites. And our goal, one of our biggest goals is to get that job ready for commissioning and get that job ready for turnover to Alex Renew. So this time next year, we'll talk about this at governance, but one of the ideas we had about this time next year, we hope to be taking the board on a tour for a River Renew preview and would invite the city and Fairfax as well as part of that. But our job right now is to get that system commissioned and ready to operate. At the same time, we're also investing significantly in the pre-construction and design phase for Phase Forward. So another big initiative is to move the Phase Forward program forward. We just talked about some of our initiatives around 4MGD expansion and PFAS. And one other thing to highlight, we will be coming to the board in the next few months to present an overview of our climate change study that we discussed during a board retreat last year. And we'd like to present an update to the board. Ms. Dinas will be coming in potentially with our consultant to give an update on climate change and how we're dealing with not just the sea level rise and increased rainfall, but also heat stressors for our staff. Really getting too fancy with these transitions. Thriving workforce. Ms. Vian mentioned that we're making an investment in our maintenance expense this year, so that's a big initiative for us. In addition to that, we are also getting positive feedback from several initiatives we've done over the last 2 years. One of those is around team building. So we've done team building at Building Momentum the last 2 years. We've mixed up our department staff and they really liked the competition and they felt like that's something they want to do more often. So we're looking at ways to build team building into our communications and coordination with staff throughout the year, perhaps on a quarterly basis. One of the other big things we're doing this year is we're investing in training. So as we presented during the budget process, we now have a technical training department under HR. And that technical trainer is a former operator that has a passion for training. So she's going to be working with our HR department and operations department to stand up training SOPs, how we operate specific equipment. So everybody's doing things the Alex Renew new way, not their specific way. So it's going to give us a lot of standards around how we operate equipment. Ms. Dinas just highlighted some of the strategic partnerships that we're working on regionally with our regional partners. We don't want the regional biosolids study to be the start and end of that regional partnership. We're continuing our meetings on a quarterly basis. But as I mentioned, we are looking to that group to help lead the discussion on PFAS guidance in the Commonwealth of Virginia, get ahead of these issues as opposed to being reactive to them. One of the other things you'll be hearing about from us this year as well, perhaps at the next board meeting, Ms. Water will give an update on the Arlington Alexandria Alex Renew Service Agreement. We'd like to bring that to a close, and we'll also be doing a presentation on the Commonwealth Infiltration and Inflow Study in, I believe it's June, right, Ms. Van? Is that what we moved it to, or May? So we'll have an update on that as well coming up for the board. Around environmental sustainability, there's one big initiative, but there are two subsets to that initiative. One is an organizational-wide sustainability plan for operations. That's one big initiative we've got this year. We've already started putting together an outline for that. The second piece is building sustainability into each of our capital projects, whether that be through standard specifications for how we conduct work in a sustainable manner, looking at LEED and Envision as guidance around sustainability as well. So there's a technical side to it, and then there's an organizational side to it that we're working through right now, and plan to update the board later on this year. And then finally, our bring to the community, probably the biggest one here is looking at our rates. Building on the board retreat, we will be conducting further studies into an alternative rate structure, looking at the equivalent residential unit option for potential implementation, and presenting that to the board throughout the calendar year as we move forward to next year's rate setting process. We want to continue to build on what we've done for LEAP. And just like sustainability, we have completed a pretty extensive environmental justice assessment for the organization. We also want to build standard operating procedures and processes into the organization based on the outcomes of that study. That's something Ms. Waters will be taking a lead on, and we'll be updating you throughout the year as we make some of those initiatives and changes to the organization. And maybe we talked about this earlier today, but it's a big year for milestones on River Renew, and we want to celebrate those in a way that give back to the community. We're really excited about our Hoops Run event on June 7th. That'll be followed by an event where we have a ribbon cutting on the promenade later this fall for the Pendleton Street site. That's it.
Impressive how you've taken the 5 strategic outcomes that came from the board retreat, which were really just 5 sentences, and turned it into a rather detailed operational plan for a couple of years. Very impressive. Okay, moving to the final item in this section, contract 250007, process optimization.
Process optimization is our fancy report for there's a pretty detailed memo in front of the board, and I guess the highlights of that are we went out for design bid build procurement. We pre-qualified 14, received 3 bids. Our low bidder was Ace Construction at a value of about $7.3 billion. And them being the low bidder, I guess a little bit about Ace Construction. They built the process air compressor project. They built the 116 MGD expansion project as part of River Renew, and they're also one of our current job order contractors. The bids were pretty close, with Ace being the lowest bidder, and it was $3.6 million less than we had the investment. So we did see some cost savings there. We did carry $12.5 million in the budget for next fiscal year and next 2 fiscal years, 26, 27. We expect that we anticipated about 11.3 million of that was for construction. So we're well under that number of 11.3 million. The rest is for soft costs associated with engineering services during construction and our RE and inspection services. So we wanted to bring this to the board for approval this evening. there's any questions about the process, we're happy to answer them. But as with all these memos recently, we're trying to put a summary at the end of each memo where we summarize the capital cost. And Mr. Chan's presentation last month, he had this donut chart in there. We're updating the projected capital costs associated with the entire program, which includes the design at 9.4 million, given now that we've got the construction costs.
Yep.
And I believe our ask for the board tonight does this include the CO delegate? So I think we have to update this number to 7.25 times 1.25. So we might have a edit to the memo.
I think we could do that calculation, right? You got that? It's around 9.
So the not to exceed amount would be, I still need to put that number.
9.7, something like that. There you go.
So it'd be a not to exceed 9,067,670,000, Kevin, or 067? 9,067,500. That includes the 25% change order value by the CO delegated authority. But the construction bid came in at 725.
Is there discussion from the board? DJ? Steve? Good. Like this.
Yeah.
Is there a motion? Mr. Beal, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well done. Okay, last but not least, monthly outcomes.
Maybe just look at the report for TNF. Just need to look at this every month. Page 1, since we just talked about it, TN for the year so far is 2+. So we'd be peaking out our future waste load concentration. Fairly. So jump to page 3. I just want to mention on page 3, table 1.4, we are now tracking as discussed with the board when you approve the basic ordering agreements with our engineering firms. We are now tracking those active task force. You can see some of those here. Owner's advisor for tertiary project, that's Carollo, some general engineering services, PFAS sampling support, and the elevator project design services during construction for Jacobs Engineering. So we'll keep tracking those here if we have active task orders come out of those new basic ordering agreements. Bottom of page 3, and then all of pretty much page 4, I will turn over to Ms. Waters to give an update on the General Assembly wrap up and recent Supreme Court ruling and potential impact on our organization.
General Assembly, really nothing new. They are adjourned until April 2nd, awaiting the governor's movement on the bill to pass. He has a deadline of March 24th. We submitted a letter to the governor about that procurement bill that required 8% of it would be apprentice labor. And we requested that it be amended or vetoed or that we be exempt. So still waiting to hear on that. At the federal level, we have the NACWA policy fly-in coming up in April 8th and 9th. And we are working with UOSA and Loudon Water to go jointly to the Virginia delegation to meet with them during the fly-in and discuss funding, affordability issues. We do this every day. We partner with HRSD as well. They will not be attending this year. So, me and Miles, who was at a previous meeting. With the Supreme Court, there is a summary on page 4, Mr. Carlson, but to give you an overview of the decision from March. It was a split decision, and it focuses on a legal issue under the Clean Water Act. So whether EPA or permit writers for state delegated programs can include in NPDES permits a broad catch-all provision that here are your limits, your technology-based limits, water quality-based limits, and you must otherwise not cause or contribute to violations of water quality standards. The reason that is problematic is because under the Clean Water Act, which it's, the framework is beautifully done, it requires the regulators to do what is called the reasonable potential analysis. And Mr. Call referred to this earlier in the 4MGD presentation. So if the technology-based limits are not enough to ensure that we're not going to degrade water quality, the regulators go through a process, a scientific process that's water body specific, that looks at the reasonable potential for our discharge to cause or contribute to water quality standards violation. And if there is that possibility, then they have to translate an in-stream water quality standard to an end-of-pipe water quality-based effluent limits that gives us, the permittee, certainty about what is our regulatory target. That allows us to plan for and to fund infrastructure improvements, upgrades, operational changes in order to meet that target. So what we've been seeing over the last, I think, decade is more and more we're seeing permits pop up that have this language about cause or contribute. And in many of them, it's where regulators have been shortcutting that reasonable potential analysis. So they keep that backstop in there in case they need to come back in during the permit term and take action if they believe the discharge is causing or contributing to in-stream water quality violation. So this is something that came up through the Ninth Circuit in a case that was filed by San Francisco. And there was a Ninth Circuit decision that was, I think, a very bad interpretation of how the Clean Water Act works. So that was on the books. San Francisco appealed it to the Supreme Court. We joined, once the Supreme Court granted cert to hear this case, we were approached by NAWQA, who's filing an amicus brief requesting that a broad coalition of utilities and associations from both Democratic and Republican cities sign on to support it. So we, Alex, when you did sign on to that brief. The decision does not say that EPA and state regulators cannot include water quality-based limits. All it says is they can't include these vague sort of end result in-stream limits that a permittee really would not know how to meet. So again, we were happy with the decision. There's been a lot of media coverage, and we had a discussion with Ms. Hammer about the differences we have on this particular case, but also the process, which is more important, that we don't sign on to briefs very often. And if we're going to bring it to the board and we'll discuss it with you and make sure that you agree. I can't convince you of the reason, the basis for signing on, then we shouldn't be signing on. So that'll change our process moving forward. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have on the case or the occasion. If you want to talk specifically about, okay.
You can talk about it. I guess our risk,
Yeah.
I think we talked to Ms. Hammer about this, but TMDLs are a great thing for us, I think, because it gives us certainty on our permit. Our one risk in this discussion would have been outfall one. We do not have we just like San Francisco, we had 4 overflows per less. We meet EPA's DSO policy today, but that doesn't mean it couldn't change in the future. And this language come back into effect as outfall one, and we have to build additional infrastructure. That's our as Alex knew, that's where our most risk is. Elsewhere, it's for us, it's a blessing that we have a TMDL. We're a huge fan of TMDLs personally, but it gives us certainty, as we discussed earlier.
I don't know what was your discussion with Ms. Hammond, but I was happy with that.
Well, we talked because we signed briefs on opposite sides of the case.
Okay.
You may have read me in the Washington Post complaining about this decision.
Okay.
But we don't have to get into it now. Because we've hashed it all out and we're good.
Okay. So we were on the side.
It is what it is. Samuel Alito has spoken. You can all interpret that how you will.
Maybe moving forward to page 6 of the monthly report, Mr. Robertson, if you want to give an update on the status of delinquencies and what we're seeing with LEAP and the LEAP dashboard.
Okay, so not terribly shocking that we've not seen a huge increase in payment plan enrollments and leave disbursements in February, specifically because we've still been limited in our ability to disconnect payments. That has somewhat limited our ability to encourage that.
That's weather related.
Yeah, so anytime the weather's below 32 degrees, basically, we can't disconnect. So most of February, we were very limited. We only disconnected 9 customers. We're still seeing a sort of a slight decrease in the number of accounts here. We have 30 accounts less this month, and then a little jump in the total over month over month. I don't know, but overall, just kind of flatline this month. In really.
I went back, I was looking at the last few months of data. Actually, I started a spreadsheet because that's how I am. But I noticed that the number of delinquent accounts has been ticking down every month, and which is good. But the dollar amount owed is the same as it was 3 or 4 months ago. Do you have any sense of why that is?
Yeah, so part of it is we have, if a commercial customer does not pay their bill for a single month, their balance jumps, like carries a lot more weight basically in the overall. So we've eliminated a lot of our residential customers that were past due, and now we're working on commercial accounts. We've worked directly with the city. So we met with the city last month, the Office of Housing, and provided additional information, including that we increased the LEAP disbursement amount to $1,000 and promised pay information. So we're hoping that kind of gets some of the folks that are in ARHA and some of the other affordability programs in the city to maybe jump on board. But really the commercial piece is why that balance is still lingering.
Got
it. In addition, so we met with Promise in January, and they have a communications campaign that they're running on our behalf that basically encourages folks that received a tax return to put that towards catching up on their balance. So we'll see if that has any traction as well. Typically, Promise's communications campaigns have worked very well in the past. So we'll see if that gets us some payment plan enrollees. Other than that, it's kind of a boring report this month. We distributed about $4,000 to 6 customers, so you can see that the $2,000 increase. Not a lot stands out on the next 2 pages. We're seeing some of the continuing trends that we've seen in the past. You can still see some of the same census tracts here are more likely to have leaf dispersants. Then if you go to the next page, if you all will recall, we're now tracking 3 months back. But some of this is still carryover from the last report. You can see that the average and median hasn't dramatically increased or changed really. The 86% is a slight decrease over last month, but we're still covering the vast majority of people's balance when they do apply for leave. So overall, it's been very beneficial.
Enrollment this month?
Yeah, that'll show up in March.
What's that?
It wouldn't show up on this report.
Right. So,
Yeah. So we had 6 people enroll in a single week. Not this last week, but the week before.
Nice.
That was on this report. But we are seeing some.
Spoiler alert for next month. What do I have to look forward to?
Was there something that triggered those 6, or was it just happened that way?
Well, it's hard to say for certain. We did coordinate with the city before that, so it could have been something the city did. We also sent out an email directly before that to all of our past due customers that said, Please enroll. So you could attribute it to either or. We didn't track it that way, so it's.
Going back to the map. Census tract 200-302. It's the one right, there's a big dense cluster.
Yes, this.
Yeah. Any sense of what's going on there? The neighbors talking to each other?
So we have reached out. So it's a condo. Almost every person in the neighborhood is on a payment plan currently. So we reached out. I have not heard back from the property manager, but
It's along Holmes Run and 395, that area there. I think.
so it could be a case where we started disconnecting one person. But we haven't really gotten to the bottom of it. We are aware that it is a single.
There's a lot of individual meters in those condos are probably mostly rented.
They are.
Probably investment party and rented. And the rental rates are probably for a unit like that lower than the average in the city. So it's folks who are more likely to have problems paying the bills who have separate meters, individual meters. I think that's part of the reason we're seeing the cluster at that particular.
And they might have to pay Alex Reno outside of their rent too, or they might have one utility included in their.
That's
rent,
right.
not
They have to
Alex
they're probably paying their rent, their utilities directly
Yeah.
rather than having the investor, which is generally a multifamily building, would pay and then parse it out. But these are going to be the condos, individual owners of the condos who are leasing them out. And it just probably you just triple net the lease and you pay, all your utilities, you rent the place.
Yeah, that one is certainly a neighborhood problem, but hopefully we get to the bottom of whether it's.
Thank you.
Question on commercial accounts, and you mentioned earlier that the dollar amount had gone down. Because the commercial accounts that are delinquent are greater. Have we seen an increase in commercial account delinquencies?
Not an increase in the number of commercial, but if one of them falls behind past due and it's a large customer, a lot of times that accounts for a pretty significant increase. So when we look at it like month over month, sometimes like a huge percentage of the balance is
Right.
20 or 30 commercial.
So I'm going to, given that some real estate investors are just turning over the keys, they're stopped making the mortgage payments and buildings are being sold at auction and commercial office, and some of our owners who own smaller commercial investment properties in Old Town own similar kind of properties in DC, and they're doing that there. So I don't know how we protect ourselves that we don't find that kind of we're out of luck because they're gone. They're gone. They don't have responsibility for the building anymore, and they owe us money.
Yeah, so I'm sure that can be an issue. One of the bigger issues for us is that we don't disconnect what we call a commercial account that's actually an apartment complex, because we don't want to disconnect all the people who live there. So a lot of times, if an apartment in particular is past due, that can carry a balance, and then we're somewhat limited other than through communication.
I think we're going to see that the properties in most distress are going to be non-residential properties at this point. Folks are still renting out, not getting the increases they want. But I think the residential commercial properties will be a long time, I think, until we see, months, if not years, any kind of increase in delinquencies and people giving up their residential investments. It's going to be retail, it's going to be office. That's where the folks are just saying, they can't make the mortgage anymore. They had to refinance their commercial mortgage and can't find anybody to refinance it. The values have dropped. There was the block next to City Hall to Tavern Square was sold. And the folks who owned it took a big hit. Now somebody bought it. But the values have just dropped like a rock and people are giving up.
Absolutely. Fortunately, we do offer payment plans to commercial customers. We do not offer leave. So that's also something to keep in the back of your mind.
Questions on LEAP? Mr. Carl, any comments on Fates Forward, or have we kind of covered that already?
Covered page forward, and that's just an update on the River News side. Really, again, on page 3, our focus is bring those external site work to completion. Hoofs Run, we are now restoring the riparian buffer, planning additional trees south of Jameson Avenue to try and get ready for the event on June 3rd. North of Glenison is planted and should start to green up in the next few weeks. Alex News site, we're really focused on the superstructure. You can see all four corners of the building now. If you look out on the 6th floor, you can actually see all 4 corners of the building. You can see the shape of it, and that'll start to increase in height. Already talked about on page 5, the River New event June 7th. And I guess on the last page, just want to call out the board's attention on page 6. The rendering's not that good, so don't judge it. It doesn't look great.
Like Easter Island.
Yeah.
thing.
But right outside of our boardroom along the soccer field is where Hazel's Cutter Head's going to be installed as a display on the dedication of everybody involved in the program and what we've all done to build. So that'll be out there with a plaque. And then right now I'm thinking then by the end of September, we're supposed to have it in place for our open house. So that'll be in place by September. There will be micro piles under Hazel to support the Cutter Head because it is 90 ton. So, but it's ADA accessible, and then she's surrounded by Helena Witch Hazel in honor of her name.
Anything else you want to cover? Okay, at this point, we need to go into closed session. So I'll make the motion pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2, 3711A8. I move that the board of this authority enter into a closed meeting for the sole purpose of consultation with legal counsel on a service agreement. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Mr. Beal, all in favor? That's at 7:45. Stephen? Thank you. Thank you. That's cool. Thank you.